A court summons showed up at my apartment. My dad used my SSN for his $312,000 lawsuit, and I made him regret it. I found it on a Tuesday morning, taped to my apartment door like a parking ticket someone wanted to make sure I saw, not slipped underneath, not in my mailbox. Taped, right at eye level, impossible to miss when I left for work. The envelope was thick, official, the kind that doesn't bend when you touch it. Across the front, stamped in red ink, it said court summons, and underneath, defendant copy. My stomach did something cold and sharp before my brain even caught up. I pulled it off the door, the tape making a ripping sound that felt too loud in the quiet hallway. My neighbor's door was still closed. The building smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. Normal morning, normal Tuesday. Except for the envelope in my hands that suddenly made everything feel wrong. I didn't open it in the hallway. I went back inside, locked the door behind me, and stood in my kitchen under the overhead light. My hands were shaking slightly, just enough that the paper rattled when I tried to hold it still. I tore the seal. Inside was a single folded document, printed on thick legal paper with a case number at the top and a court seal that looked too real to be a mistake. Summons to defendant case number CV202508847. Plaintiff, Meridian Capital Solutions, LLC. Defendant, Jordan Hayes. My name. My full legal name, middle initial and everything, spelled exactly right. I kept reading, even though my eyes kept jumping back to my name, like my brain refused to accept it was really there. Amount in dispute, $312,000. Cause of action, breach of financial guarantee. Agreement court date, March 18th, 2026. $312,000. I read it again, then a third time, slower, because the words weren't making sense in an order my brain could process. I had never heard of Meridian Capital Solutions. I had never signed a financial guarantee. I had never agreed to be responsible for anyone's debt, let alone a debt the size of a small house. My pulse started doing something uneven in my throat, the kind of rhythm that makes you aware of your own heartbeat in a way that doesn't feel good. I flipped the page. The second sheet was denser, filled with legal language I had to read twice to understand. But one phrase kept appearing, bolded every time, like it wanted to make sure I saw it. One financial guarantor. The document said I had personally guaranteed a business loan, that I had signed an agreement acknowledging full responsibility for repayment in the event of default, that I had been notified of delinquency multiple times and failed to respond. I stood there in my kitchen, holding a piece of paper that said I owed more money than I'd ever seen in my life for something I had never, not once, agreed to. Then I saw the line that made my hands go completely numb. Guarantor SSN. Last four. 7863. That was mine, not close, not similar, mine. Someone hadn't just used my name. They'd used my social security number, and the only people who had access to that, the only people who'd ever asked me for it and made me feel like I was being paranoid for hesitating, were my parents. I sat down at my table without deciding to. The chair scraped against the floor, too loud in the silence. My father's voice played in my head from years ago, casual and insistent. I just need it for the paperwork, Jordan. It's temporary, just to get things processed faster. I'd given it to him. I was 19. I didn't know any better. I thought that's what family did. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of every page. Then I did it again, closer, making sure the case number and my SSN were visible. My hands were still shaking, but I forced them steady because I needed these photos clear. Then I called the only people who would know why my name was on a lawsuit I'd never heard of. My mother answered on the first ring. Her voice was bright, warm, the tone she used when she wanted to sound harmless. "Jordan, sweetie," she said, "everything okay?" I didn't answer her question. I went straight to the problem. "I have a court summons," I said, voice flat. "It says I'm being sued for $312,000. It has my social security number on it." Silence. Not the kind of silence that means surprise. The kind that means someone is deciding what to say next. Then my mother gasped, but it sounded practiced, rehearsed, like she'd been waiting for this call and had already planned her reaction. "What?" she said, voice high and tight. "Oh my God, Jordan, that's insane. Are you okay?" Her concern didn't match the pause before it. It felt like a performance with a script she'd memorized but hadn't practiced enough. My father's voice came on the line a second later, calm and controlled, like he'd been listening the whole time. "Don't panic," he said, smooth and steady. "It's probably a mistake. These things happen." A mistake. The word sat heavy in my chest, because mistakes don't include correct Social Security numbers. "It has my SSN," I repeated. "The last 4 digits are right." Another pause. Shorter this time. Then my father said, "Could be identity theft. You need to report it." Identity theft. The explanation landed too quickly, too neatly, like he'd had it ready before I even called. My mother jumped back in. "We'll help you," she said. "Don't do anything yet. Let us look into it first." Don't do anything. The same thing they always said when they wanted time to manage a situation before I could react to it. "What company is it?" my father asked, and his voice had changed slightly. Less fatherly concern, more information gathering. I glanced down at the summons. Meridian Capital Solutions. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. "Meridian," my father repeated slowly, like he was tasting the word. "Do you know them?" I asked. "No," he said, but it came too fast. "Never heard of them." I stared at the summons, at the plaintiff name printed in bold at the top, and something clicked in the back of my mind. A memory I couldn't quite reach. "The paperwork says I'm listed as a financial guarantor," I said. "Guarantor?" My father's voice shifted again, sharper now. "They used that exact word?" I hadn't said they used it. I'd said the paperwork did. "Yes," I said slowly. "Why?" "Just asking," he said, too casually. "These scammers use specific language to sound official." But I hadn't called it a scam, and he'd known the word before I'd fully explained what the document said. My mother cut in again, voice softer now, pulling me toward her like she was trying to hug me through the phone. "Come over tonight," she said. "We'll go through everything together. You shouldn't deal with this alone." There it was. The invitation that wasn't about comfort. It was about control. About getting me into their house, off my ground, surrounded by their space and their rules. "I'm not coming over," I said. My father's tone cooled by 1 precise degree. "Jordan," he said, "this is serious. Don't be stubborn." Stubborn. The word he used when I didn't do what he wanted. "I'll handle it," I said. "Handle it how?" he asked, and now there was an edge underneath the calm. "You don't even know what you're dealing with." "Then I'll figure it out," I said. My mother's voice trembled slightly, or she made it tremble. "Jordan, please, we're trying to help." "I know," I said. So even though I didn't believe it anymore, I ended the call before they could say anything else. The silence after felt worse than their voices. My apartment suddenly seemed too small, the light too bright, the summons too heavy in my hands. I turned the pages over again and looked at something I'd skimmed the first time, a reference line buried in the middle of the legal text. Guarantee executed via notarized signature on May 14th, 2023. May 14th, 2023. I pulled up my phone calendar and scrolled back. That was the week I'd been in the hospital for an emergency appendectomy. I'd been on morphine and could barely sign my own discharge papers. There was no possible way I'd signed anything that week, let alone something legal and notarized. My chest tightened because mistakes are random. Forgeries are not. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with my laptop open, reading everything I could find about financial guarantees, identity theft, and familial fraud. I took screenshots of legal definitions. I wrote down the steps for disputing fraudulent debt. I made notes in a document I titled simply Records. At 7 a.m., I called the courthouse listed on the summons and asked how to access case filings online. The clerk walked me through the portal. I entered the case number with shaking hands. The page loaded. Case status: active defendant, Jordan Hayes. Plaintiff, Meridian Capital Solutions, LLC. Filing date: January 12, 2026. There were 3 documents attached. I clicked the first one. A complaint. Standard legal language about breach of contract, failure to pay, financial responsibility. I clicked the second one. A motion for summary judgment. Then I clicked the third. Exhibit A. Personal guarantee agreement. My heart stopped. It was a scanned document, 2 pages. At the top, in clean printed text, it said, Personal Financial Guarantee. Below that, a paragraph stating that I, Jordan Hayes, agreed to personally guarantee repayment of a business loan issued to a company called Hayes Consulting Group, LLC. Hayes Consulting Group, my father's company, the one he'd been running for 15 years. The one he'd always called his venture, like it was something temporary even though it had never ended. At the bottom of the second page was a signature line. My name was printed underneath it, and above it was a signature that looked like mine if you didn't look closely. Confident, rushed. The letters slanted the way mine did, but the pressure was wrong. The spacing was wrong. It was the kind of signature someone writes when they've seen yours enough times to imitate it, but not enough to make it perfect. Next to the signature was a notary stamp. I zoomed in on the image until the stamp filled my screen. Notary Public, Linda Ramos, Commission. Expires August 2026. Office address: 400 to 28 Maple Street, Unit 6. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the street. Maple Street was 10 minutes from my parents' house. I took a screenshot, then another. Then I downloaded the entire document and saved it in 3 different places. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Please call us. Your father didn't sleep. We're worried. I stared at the message, at the word worried, and felt something cold and clean settle into my chest. They weren't worried I was in trouble. They were worried I was going to figure it out. I opened a new browser tab and searched for legal aid services in my area. I needed a lawyer, and I needed one who'd seen this kind of thing before. The first attorney I spoke to was a woman named Angela Reyes. She worked at a nonprofit legal clinic that handled identity theft and consumer fraud cases. Her office smelled like old files and coffee that had been reheated too many times. I handed her the summons, the court filings, and the screenshots I'd taken. She read them in silence, her face neutral in that professional way lawyers have when they're seeing something bad, but don't want to scare you before they've confirmed it. Then she looked up at me and asked very carefully, "Do you know the person who runs Hayes Consulting Group?" "Yes," I said. "It's my father." Her expression didn't change, but I saw something shift behind her eyes. Not surprise, recognition. "Okay," she said slowly. "Then this isn't random identity theft. This is familial fraud." The words landed clean and sharp, like a diagnosis you've suspected but hoped wasn't true. "Can they do that?" I asked. "No," she said, "but people do it anyway." She tapped the signature page. "This is forged, and if the notarization happened while you were hospitalized, we can prove you couldn't have been present." "What happens if I do nothing?" I asked. Her eyes met mine, steady and serious. "If you do nothing, the court assumes consent. You'll be legally responsible for the debt. They can garnish your wages, seize your assets, destroy your credit. And your father walks away clean." My stomach turned. "So I have to fight my own father in court." "Yes," she said. "Or you let him ruin you financially." I stared at the papers on her desk, at my forged signature, at the notary stamp from a street near my parents' house. "I want to fight it," I said. She nodded once, like she'd been waiting for me to say it. "Then we start building your case." Over the next 3 days, Angela walked me through a process I didn't know existed. We requested my credit report. We pulled IRS transcripts. We filed a fraud affidavit with the court. And that's when we found the second debt. It appeared on my credit report, buried under a section I'd never looked at closely before. A lien filed 2 years ago by a company called Vertex Financial Services. Amount: $48,000. I stared at the screen, my pulse doing something uneven in my throat. I never borrowed money from them, I said. Angela clicked through to the details. The lien was filed in 2023, she said. Same year as the guarantee signature. Different company, but look at the filing address. I looked. 428 Maple Street, Unit 6. The same notary office. Angela's jaw tightened slightly. This wasn't a one-time thing, she said. This was a pattern. My phone rang. My father. I didn't answer. He called again, then my mother, then my father again. Angela watched my phone light up on her desk. They know you're digging, she said. That night, my mother texted me. We need to talk. Family meeting. Tomorrow at 6. Please come. I didn't respond. An hour later, my father called and left a voicemail. His voice was calm, measured, but there was something underneath it I'd never heard before. Not anger, urgency. Jordan, he said, I know you're upset. I know this looks bad. But if you come over, I can explain everything. There are things you don't understand about how business works. Things I was trying to protect you from. Just come talk to me, please. I deleted the voicemail. But the next morning, my mother called from the landline. The number I couldn't block because I'd programmed it into my phone years ago as home. Jordan, she said, and her voice cracked in a way that might have been real. Your father is a mess. He's not eating. He's not sleeping. This is killing him. Please just come over so we can talk face to face. I took a slow breath. What is there to talk about? Everything, she said. The lawsuit, the misunderstanding, all of it. We can fix this if you just give us a chance. Misunderstanding. The word they used when they meant cover-up. I'll think about it, I said, and ended the call. Now Angela advised me not to go. They'll try to manipulate you, she said, get you to sign something or admit to something that helps their case. But part of me needed to see it, needed to watch them try to explain the unexplainable. So I went. I drove to my parents' house on a gray Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that feels like it's holding its breath. The house looked the same as always. Neat lawn, clean driveway, the kind of place that looked stable from the outside. I knocked instead of using my key. My mother opened the door, and her face did something complicated when she saw me. Relief mixed with something that looked like guilt. Jordan, she said softly, thank you for coming. I stepped inside without hugging her. My father was sitting at the dining room table, hands folded in front of him like he was waiting for a meeting to start. He looked tired. Older, but his eyes were sharp when they met mine. Sit down, he said, not unkindly. I sat across from him. My mother sat beside him, hands clasped together like she was praying. And that's when I saw it. On the table, arranged in a neat stack, were papers, legal-sized, printed, with tabs sticking out the sides and sticky notes marking specific sections. They'd been preparing for this. My father slid the top page toward me. I know you're confused, he said. I know this looks bad, but I need you to understand something. I didn't touch the paper. Understand what? The business was struggling, he said. I needed capital to keep it running. The bank required a personal guarantee. And I didn't have enough credit on my own. So you used mine, I said flatly. I used your name, he corrected. Temporarily, just to get the loan approved. I was going to remove you from the paperwork once things stabilized. Without telling me. His jaw tightened slightly. You were young. You wouldn't have understood the nuances. I was 19, I said. Not a child. My mother leaned forward, her voice soft and pleading. Jordan, he was trying to protect you. If the business failed, he didn't want you to feel responsible. So instead, he made me legally responsible without my knowledge. My father's tone hardened by 1 degree. It was supposed to be temporary. You keep saying that, I said. But the debt isn't temporary. The lawsuit isn't temporary. My name on a financial guarantee I never signed isn't temporary. He exhaled slowly, like I was being difficult. Then he tapped the stack of papers in front of him. This is a clarification agreement, he said. It states that you were aware of the guarantee and that you're willing to work with me on a repayment plan. If you sign it, the lawsuit goes away. I stared at the papers, at the tabs, at the sticky notes that said, "Sign here," in my mother's handwriting. You want me to say I knew about this, I said slowly, so you don't get charged with fraud. No one said fraud, my father said quickly. I'm saying fraud, I replied. My mother's face crumpled. Jordan, please. This will destroy your father. His business, his reputation, everything he's worked for. I looked at her, at the tears that might have been real, and felt something crack open in my chest. Not sympathy, clarity. What about what this will destroy for me? I asked quietly. My father leaned back in his chair, and his expression shifted. The warmth drained out of it, replaced by something cold and legal. If you don't sign this, he said, voice calm and controlled, the lawsuit moves forward. You'll have to hire a lawyer. You'll have to go to court. It'll cost you thousands of dollars you don't have. And even if you win, your credit is already damaged. The lien is already filed. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're just making it worse. There it was, the threat wrapped in logic. And if I do sign? I asked. We handle it as a family, he said. Quietly, no lawyers, no judges, no public records. I looked down at the clarification agreement, at the line that said I acknowledged prior knowledge and consented to the terms. It was a confession disguised as a resolution. I stood up. I'm not signing, I said. My father's face went hard. Jordan! I'm not signing, I repeated, louder this time. My mother stood too, reaching for my arm. Please, just think about it. Sleep on it. Don't make a decision when you're upset. I pulled my arm away. I'm not upset, I said. I'm done. I walked toward the door. My father's voice followed me, colder now, stripped of pretense. You're making a mistake, he said. If you go through with this, it'll cost you more than money. It'll cost you your family. I stopped at the door and turned back. You already cost me that, I said. Then I left. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't scream or punch the steering wheel or pull over to catch my breath. I just drove, hands steady, eyes clear, because I'd already decided what I was going to do. The threats would come later, I knew that. The calls, the texts, the relatives who'd be pulled into the narrative my parents were already building. But I also knew something they didn't. I had documentation, and I had a lawyer who believed me. When I got home, my phone was already exploding. 7 texts from my mother, 3 from my father, 2 from my Aunt Carol, who I hadn't spoken to in a year. I didn't read them. I opened my laptop and emailed Angela. They tried to get me to sign a confession. I refused. What's next? She responded within 10 minutes. Good. Now we file the counterclaim. Over the next week, Angela and I built the case piece by piece. We pulled hospital records proving I was incapacitated the day the guarantee was supposedly signed. We requested handwriting analysis on the forged signature. We subpoenaed the notary who'd stamped the document. And then we filed. A motion to dismiss the lawsuit. A fraud affidavit naming my father as the perpetrator. A request for damages. My father was officially served on a Thursday morning. I know because my phone started ringing 30 seconds later. I didn't answer. By that afternoon, my extended family was calling. My Uncle Dan, my cousin Sophie, my grandmother, who I loved, but who'd always believed my father could do no wrong. Some of them begged, some of them accused. One called me selfish. Another called me vindictive. But my Aunt Carol, my father's younger sister, sent a single text that made my chest tighten. I suspected something like this years ago. I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I'm proud of you. I saved that text in a folder I'd started keeping. Evidence, support, proof that I wasn't crazy. The lawsuit was paused pending investigation. My father hired a lawyer. A real one this time, not someone from his network who owed him favors. And that's when discovery started. Angela requested all communications between my father and Meridian Capital Solutions. Emails, letters, contracts. What came back was worse than I'd imagined. There were emails, dozens of them. My father negotiating terms with the loan company, discussing repayment schedules. And in one message, dated 3 months before the lawsuit was filed, he'd written, "If it comes to enforcement, we'll need a secondary guarantor. I'll handle the paperwork." Angela slid the printed email across her desk toward me. "He planned this," she said quietly. "He knew the debt was coming, and he set you up as the fallback." I stared at the words, "I'll handle the paperwork," and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. "He called me a buffer," I said. "Yes," Angela said. "That's exactly what you were." The court scheduled an emergency hearing, not a full trial, just a preliminary review to determine whether the case should proceed or be dismissed based on fraud allegations. I sat in the courtroom in a gray blazer I'd borrowed from a friend, hands folded in my lap, trying to look calm, even though my pulse was doing something erratic under my skin. My father sat 3 rows behind me with his lawyer. I didn't turn around to look at him. I didn't need to. I could feel his presence like a weight pressing against the back of my neck. The judge was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every kind of lie a courtroom could produce. She reviewed the filings in silence. Then she looked up. "Mr. Hayes," she said, addressing my father's lawyer, "your client is named in a fraud affidavit filed by the defendant in this matter, who is also his daughter. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer said, "and the affidavit alleges that the defendant's signature on the financial guarantee was forged." "That is the allegation, yes." The judge's eyes shifted to my father, who sat very still, hands folded, face neutral. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "did your daughter consent to being listed as a financial guarantor for your business loan?" The courtroom went silent. My father's lawyer leaned over and whispered something to him. My father nodded once. Then he stood. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady, "there was a misunderstanding about the scope of the agreement." The judge's expression didn't change. "That's not what I asked. I asked if she consented." My father hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. "I believed she understood the nature of the paperwork," he said carefully. "Did she sign the document in your presence?" Another pause. "No, Your Honor." The judge leaned back slightly. "Then who signed it?" I'm not certain." The judge's eyes narrowed. "You're not certain who signed a legal document bearing your daughter's name and social security number?" "It may have been handled by my accountant," my father said quickly. "Your accountant forged your daughter's signature?" "Not forged," my father corrected. "Processed." The judge looked at him for a long, silent moment. Then she looked at Angela. "Counselor," she said, "you've requested handwriting analysis?" "Yes, Your Honor," Angela said, standing. "We've retained a forensic document examiner. The report is filed with the court." The judge flipped through the file in front of her, found the report, and read it. Her face didn't change, but when she looked up, her tone had. "The expert concludes with high certainty that the signature on the guarantee document was not written by the defendant," she said. "Furthermore, hospital records confirm the defendant was incapacitated on the date of notarization." She looked at my father again. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "I'm ordering a full forensic review of this document. I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges." My father's face went pale. "Your Honor," his lawyer started. "We're done here," the judge said. She turned to me. "Miss Hayes, your motion to dismiss is granted. You are removed from this lawsuit effective immediately." I felt something break open in my chest. Not relief. Not yet. Just space where pressure had been. The judge wasn't finished. "Mr. Hayes," she said, looking at my father. "You are now listed as the sole guarantor on this debt. The plaintiff may proceed against you directly." My father sat down slowly, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. I didn't stay to watch. I stood, nodded at Angela, and walked out of the courtroom with my head up and my hands steady. Outside in the hallway, I finally let myself breathe. Angela found me a few minutes later. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." "The notary's been subpoenaed," she said. "She'll have to testify about who brought her the documents." "Good," I said. And I meant it. A week later, the notary cracked. Her name was Linda Ramos, and she worked out of a small office on Maple Street that also did tax prep and passport photos. Angela and I met with the assistant district attorney assigned to the case, and they played us the recording of her interview. Linda's voice was shaky but clear. "He brought me the documents," she said. "Pre-signed. He said it was urgent family business, and that his daughter had already signed but couldn't come in person." "Did you verify her identity?" the ADA asked. "No," Linda admitted. "He was a regular client. I trusted him." "Did he pay you?" A pause. "Yes," she said quietly. The ADA stopped the recording and looked at me. "That's notary fraud. She could lose her commission, and your father could face felony charges." "Will he?" I asked. "That depends on whether he takes a deal," the ADA said. "But either way, this is criminal now, not just civil." I nodded once, feeling the weight of that shift. The next day, my mother called. Not my father. My mother. Her voice was small, broken in a way I'd never heard before. "Jordan," she said, "please, can we meet? Just you and me." I thought about saying no, but part of me needed to hear what she'd say without my father scripting her lines. "Public place," I said, "and I'm recording." "Okay," she said. We met at a coffee shop near the courthouse. Neutral ground. I sat across from her with my phone on the table, recording app open and visible. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. Her hands shook slightly when she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "Your father made a mistake," she said quietly. "He committed fraud," I corrected. Her eyes filled with tears. "He was trying to save the business. By destroying me." She flinched. "He didn't think it would come to this." "What did he think would happen?" I asked. "That I'd just never find out?" She didn't answer. I leaned forward slightly. "Did you know?" She looked down at her coffee. "I knew he was struggling," she said. "I didn't know he used your name until the lawsuit." "Do you believe that?" I asked. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something that might have been honesty. "I don't know what I believe anymore," she said. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of everything: the forged signature, the expert report, the hospital records, the notary statement, the emails where my father discussed using me as a buffer. "This is what he did," I said. "Not a mistake, a plan." She opened the folder. She read the first page, then the second. Her hands were shaking harder now. When she looked up, her face was white. "I didn't know it was this bad," she whispered. "Now you do," I said. I stood up, leaving the folder on the table. "Jordan," she said, voice breaking, "what happens now?" "That's up to the DA," I said. "And your husband." I walked out. I didn't look back. 2 weeks later, the DA's office sent me an update. My father had been formally charged with identity theft, forgery, and fraud. He was offered a plea deal, restitution, probation, and a permanent fraud flag on his business records. He took it. The criminal case closed quietly. No trial, no media, just paperwork and consequences. Meridian Capital Solutions dropped their lawsuit against me entirely. The lien from Vertex Financial Services was removed from my credit report. My credit score, which had tanked when the fraud first hit, started climbing back, and I received an official letter from the court. Jordan Hayes. Zero liability confirmed. Fraud protection status, active. I framed that letter. My father's business assets were frozen pending restitution payments. Seth Hayes Consulting Group LLC dissolved 6 months later. My mother stopped calling after the plea deal. I don't know if that was her choice or his. I didn't reach out, but my Aunt Carol did, and my cousin Sophie, and a few other family members who'd been quiet during the worst of it, but who'd seen the court records and realized the truth wasn't what my father had told them. I didn't forgive everyone, but I stopped expecting apologies from people who weren't ready to give them. I moved to a new apartment, smaller, cheaper, but mine, fully mine, with a lease that had only my name on it and a mailbox that only I controlled. I deleted my parents' contact information from my phone, not out of anger, out of clarity. And I kept the folder, the one labeled Records. Inside were copies of every filing, every email, every expert report, every court order, proof that I hadn't imagined it, proof that I'd fought back, proof that the system, when you fed it the right documentation, could actually work. I looked at that folder sometimes, late at night, when doubt tried to creep in and tell me I'd overreacted, or been too harsh, or ruined my family over money. And every time, I remembered the same thing. They'd taped a court summons to my door at dawn, hoping I'd panic, hoping I'd call them, hoping I'd let them manage the crisis they'd created. But I didn't panic, I documented. And in the end, that made all the difference. Because the people who taught me to trust them forgot one simple truth. Paper remembers everything, and so do I.